Yeah, welcome all. I'm Katherine Franke. I am a member of the faculty at Columbia Law School, and I am the director of the Center for Gender and Sexuality Law, among other things. And I will just share with you a complete aside. Today, we've launched a new project at Columbia on the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment. It's one of the things that we'll be doing more work on, thinking about what a constitutional form of sex-based equality might look like. And that certainly implicates the issues we're talking about today. So I want to introduce Lisa Sangoi and Ericka Brewington, who have joined us. Lisa is the founder and or co-founder and co-director of the Movement for Family Power. And I will ask her in a moment to say a little bit about why you founded the organization and what it is that you all aim to do. And Ericka Brewington is an advocate and activist who works to abolish the child welfare system. That's a big lift, but right on. She was born and raised in Harlem and is the mother of 4 incredible kids. She's worked as an administrative assistant for several large law firms and other organizations, and is trained as a home health aide. Ericka, I'm in Harlem. Where are you? You might be close by.
Where are you?
153rd and St. Nick.
I'm by Harlem Hospital. So you're not far. I walk up
You're
there.
right over there.
Yeah, you're right up there.
All right. So welcome to you both. Thank you for joining our gender justice class, and also inaugurating the Front Lines of Gender Justice speaker series that we're doing this semester. The work you're doing is incredibly important. So I guess I'd want to start with Lisa and just ask you to tell us a little bit more about the Movement for Family Power, what the organization does, why you founded it.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us on the call, and for all of y'all for sitting in on this conversation. We really appreciate your time. So my name is Lisa Sangoi. I use she and her pronouns. And as Professor Frank said, I'm with an organization called Movement for Family Power. It's an organization that I co-founded with my work partner, Aaron Cloud. We started this organization about 2 years ago. We have both been working, trying to do advocacy around the injustices of the child welfare and foster system for some time. Aaron had been representing parents in the Bronx for almost a decade. I had done some representation, some appellate litigation. I had been researching and writing a report around the injustices of the child welfare system. And through this all, we both, over the years, we were both just felt so like the work to fight the injustices of the child welfare system, it wasn't really being considered a pressing social justice issue the way that the injustices of the immigration system or the injustices of the criminal legal system. And it felt super sidelined in movement work and activists around the country who were trying to fight the child welfare system. And in particular, parents, and in particular mothers, and in particular Black mothers who were having their kids taken away, were really just sort of being, they weren't being taken, their activism wasn't being taken as seriously as it should be. They were being pariah, they were being isolated, there wasn't enough resources, attention, support, respect going to this work. And so, we sort of, Aaron and I, despite not knowing each other well, I think we both recognized within each other, a deep commitment and passion for fighting the injustices of the child welfare system. And also we both very deeply believe in the power of social change through social justice movement building. And I think those parallel commitments kind of brought us together to start this organization to really try to fight the injustices of the child welfare system by supporting organizing, supporting movement building, supporting activists, community activists, directly impacted folks, community organizations, folks that are most proximate to the work. And, simultaneously really thinking through how can we encourage lawyers in the work to recognize what their true role is, which is not at the forefront of this fight for social justice, but really in the back, supporting the work of its true leaders. So that's just a little bit about how we started the organization, what brought us to start the organization about 2 years ago. We are now 2 years old and just ridiculously fortunate to, be in community with so many people and organizations who are just doing awesome work. And I really do feel like we are all successfully working together to build a movement, and one that is getting more and more attention, more and more recognition, one that is causing more and more fear within CPS agencies and hospitals and the other folks that we are fighting.
Thank you so much. Ericka, I'd like to invite you to say a bit about how you got involved in this work and what your organizing looks like.
I got involved because I was a parent. I am a parent that's affected. And I just don't like how they treat us. They treat us as less than, like I'm a subhuman, and I didn't like it. And how they tore my family apart, how they try to pit me against my children's father, how they try to pit my oldest son against us. And I need change. And I noticed how they use scare tactics, and but they bullies. And that's my biggest pet peeve, is a bully. And I don't like you taking advantage of somebody that don't know anything or smaller than you, or you feel you can. And I had to stand up for myself and everyone else like me. So that's why I got involved. And then I met Joyce and Lisa. That really put me more involved. And I started advocating and helping other parents that I meet navigate their way through the ACS system and let them know that they do have rights. And don't be afraid to let them know you know your rights, and stand up for yourself. And if you feel you can't, I'm there. I lean on me. I'll help you. I'll be your strength. So that's what got me involved.
Great. Ericka, what would you say are your top 3 issues with ACS that would be, if you had all the resources you could get, that you would want to reform about ACS?
How they lie. First, and how they feel like they could just storm in your house and take your kids, and they don't have to get a warrant. They don't, nothing. They just storm and have a meeting. And if they feel like, okay, this is what we decide, then it's the be all end all, and that's not right. And sensitivity training. They, I think a lot of them get desensitized, and they just, they get a report, they get a call, say a report, and they just automatically know these parents are guilty. And sometimes there's other things underlying, and they need to get to the root of everything. Not all parents neglect their kids. There could be something wrong. There could be other problems that they need help with, and everybody's looking at it like neglect, but you're not getting to the root of the problem. So you compound the problem by taking away their kids, making them feel subhuman, so you're spiraling the parent down until somebody like Lisa or Joyce McMillan or Erin Cloud come in and help them. You know what I mean? Until then, and there's not enough Lisas and Joyces and Erins around to help us all. Yeah. So you need more women like that to just help them and let people know, listen, you have a voice. You have your rights. It's not as bad as it seems. It's dark now, but there is light, and the light is bright at the end of the tunnel.
Right. Thank you. Lisa, what about you? What would you say are the 3 most critical issues right now that you're working on?
Yeah, I just want to sort of echo a lot of what Ericka is saying right now in terms of, going back, and let me just backtrack a little bit. So just in case people on the call, I'm not sure what familiarity everyone has with the acronym ACS. So ACS stands for the Administration for Children's Services. That's New York City's, what they call a child welfare agency. And what those of us who are recognizing the system for the racist, classist, ableist, misogynist thing that it is, we are calling the family regulation, the family punishment, family destruction system. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about ACS. We're talking about the system of caseworkers, of case supervisors, of ACS attorney agency attorneys, foster care agencies, this whole massive system that exists to regulate and punish families under the auspices of protecting children from harm by their parents. So, I just want to go over some real basic things. Number one, vast majority of cases in the system, just like Ericka said, are there for neglect, right? It's not, ACS would have you believe that every kid in the system is at severe risk of real bad harm from their parents. And that's just not true. Over 80% of the cases there are for neglect, which very much more resembles allegations of just living in a deeply racist and classist society that doesn't provide for its people, right? So like not having housing, not having food, not being able to get your kids to school, not having access to healthcare, so on and so forth. Secondly, in places like New York City, the vast majority of parents who are accused of abusing and neglecting their kids are Black and Latinx, right? So Chicago, New York City, Philly, you just won't see white parents in family courtrooms. And this should be a red flag to anybody who is listening, because we have never known any legal system in the United States to target exclusively people of color and low-income people only for good purposes. Like that is not the history of the United States government in the United States, any legal system in the United States. The third thing I would say is that the system, it is, it claims to be helping families, right? But if you actually look at what it's doing, so we know over 30% of kids who are removed from their parents' care could go home if their parents just had access to housing. So is this child welfare agency that's out here trying to tell the world that, oh, we're here helping people, are they providing families with housing? Absolutely not. They are doing everything but providing parents with housing. Who they are providing help for housing with is the foster family. And there are deep reasons that go back to the legacy of slavery and settler colonialism and xenophobia when the first waves of immigrants started to come over in this country during the Industrial Revolution, and so on and so forth, for why this system exists as it does and does the things that it does. So I just wanted to sort of set the stage for folks on this call who weren't in the class and didn't do some of the readings, or who've not had experience with the system. So then, in terms of reform, so really echoing what Ericka was saying about the lying, this is a system that operates with enormous amounts of impunity, right? It's not accountable. We have known folks who practice, who have encountered the criminal legal system, who practice in criminal court, to say that the family court makes criminal court look like Disney World, right? Because there is just so little accountability. There's so little practice of the law. You have so little protection of your rights in the family court system, which very much results, and one thing you learn in law school is any government power that's not that doesn't give the citizens the capacity to restrain it will push itself to its furthest extent. And that is absolutely true with the family court system. It is closed in the vast majority of the country. New York City is one of the very few places in the country where you can actually go into a courtroom and see what's actually happening. So it really does, to quote Elizabeth Brico, a parent impacted who writes prolifically about this, it's a system that operates in darkness. And because the legal practice within the family court is really not very developed, the case law is not as developed, and it is getting developed, right? We have a stronger and stronger bar of attorneys and activists and advocates who are really pushing for protections, especially in New York City. But in most of the country, it's really underdeveloped because, like I said, it's operating darkness and no one's really taking these injustices seriously. In any ways, like society and media and everybody has done a really good job of really making the worst thing possible out of a parent who's accused of abuse and neglect. So the practice standards are just really low, which means folks just operate with impunity. In New York City at some point, so there's this thing, let me give you an example. There's this thing called emergency removals, where if a kid is at imminent risk of harm, right? Like the kid is about to experience serious harm from their parent, like in moments or hours, then the agency is allowed to come in and take the kid without going to court first, right? And just stop and reflect here on this enormous governmental power of coming into a family and taking a kid out of the home. Like there's pretty much nothing more violent you could do to a person. For a long time, and ACS continues to, but for a long time, they were just using the emergency removal power to just bypass having to go to court. And at some point, you know, in history, over 50% of its removals, well over 20,000 kids in New York City were removed based on this emergency power. So that's just one example of the lawlessness. And of course, Ericka touched upon also just more representation. You know, there is no right to counsel in a child welfare proceeding. And you know, the United States Supreme Court has not established that right. And so it's left to states. And, you know, we all know what the state of civil sort of representation and funding is in this country. And, you know, with respect to sensitivity training, also just echoing what Ericka said, like there are things that folks absolutely need help with: housing, childcare, healthcare, transportation, you know. These are serious sort of systemic things that our country has decided not to provide people with. And the child welfare system comes in and labels lack of these things as child neglect, and yet has no ability to then provide for them.
I would probably just add plain old money.
Money.
Like, people just need money. Good jobs, but, you know, resources of cash kinds. Can you imagine a situation, this is a very cynical question, but can you imagine a situation where ACS comes and does an emergency renewal for a white family on the Upper East Side who is refusing to vaccinate their kid for COVID? You know, some of those anti-vaxxer types, like, you know, Bobby Kennedy's family, wherever they live.
No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen at all.
Right.
That's not going to happen at all.
So there's a racialization of risk here, of this idea of what it means for children to be at risk or be a danger, that that, you know, leaves out, I think, some real risks. I mean, we know that kids that are at risk, it happens in all income levels. It happens in all households, not disproportionately in poor households or households of color, but the kinds of risks that that more wealthy households pose to their kids are just not on the radar. Right. Have you, either of you, looked at the resource allocation of how much money the city spends on ACS and policing families of color and removing kids, as opposed to you know, the budgets for the things that you both have listed around housing and healthcare and transit and et cetera? If we were to reallocate that money, you know, divest, invest, as the Black Lives Matter movement describes it.
No, I haven't, but I can tell you this, because 2 of my kids are special needs. That foster mother for 2 of my kids was getting about $3,500 a month. So they have money. It's just going to someone else to provide for my kids instead of me or whoever, you know, anybody else in my shoes that need it.
Yeah. So
maybe they need to be defunded. Not maybe, they should be defunded. The whole system needs to be revamped. You rip the law up and let's start all over again. But you need to sit down with people, with everybody, people from ACS, people in my shoes, people like Lisa. We all need to get together, and that's who they need to get, and rewrite the law. We, like the forefathers did for the Constitution, they need to have people like us to make the Constitution for how to, you know, ACS, for lack of a better term. That's how, in my opinion, that's how it should be. I should sit down, you should sit down, me from a parent from coming from that perspective, you as someone that knows the law, that family law or whatever the case may be, and advocates, judges, you know, whoever else is there, and we all sit down and we come up with a good, I don't want to say a good law, but something that is not harmful. You know, instead of busting in my door and snatching my kids, sit down and ask me, what's wrong? Why? What can I do to help? Not, you know what, let's snatch your kids. You're going to do what we tell you to do, and then we'll give you some help. That's how they do it. That's just how they do it. They're not going to do it. They remove your kids. And if you don't dance to their beat, you don't get anything. You won't get your kids. You'll barely get a visit. It's crazy. And if you, God forbid, if your caseworker don't like you, she could write down her little composition notebook, and that's law. And it could be total lies. But that whatever she says, that's what the lawyer's going to go by. That's what the judge is going to go by. And these are the people that hold what I consider your life, your kids, which is my life, in their hands. You know what I mean? And some women, some parents are not as strong as me that can handle it. Some parents fold under that pressure. And that's why a lot of these kids do not get back home, because their parents couldn't take the pressure. Nobody told them, listen, these are your rights. And this is, if you say this to them, they'll back down and be like, uh-oh, Miss Franke know what she's doing. You know what I mean? That until that happens, ACS gonna run rampant. Yeah. They're outlaw.
Do either of you have examples of other communities, other cities that have done a better job? I mean, it's easy to tick off the cities that are doing a terrible job, but are there any examples that we could look to of how to handle the needs of parents very differently?
I have it.
Lisa, I remember you and I were talking months ago, and one of the things you said was the focus should not be on punishing people for the situations they're in and putting all these resources into policing families, but instead finding out what they need to flourish and succeed.
Yeah.
Right.
So, back to your point around invest, divest, and I think Ericka brings up an excellent point around the amount of money we're willing to give to foster parents, right? So, foster folks, people who are taking care of someone else's kids. So, the child welfare, we spend between 28 and 34 billion dollars a year on the child welfare system in this country, the family regulation system. That's more money than we spend on SNAP, supplemental nutritional assistance for children. That's more money than we spend on WIC, which is a program for low-income new mothers and their babies. It's more money than we spend on CHIP, right? The Children's Health Insurance Program, to cover the gap of kids who are not covered by Medicaid, but whose parents still can't afford, still don't have regular health insurance. So and it is an open-ended, unlike cash assistance, right? Like welfare that you get from the government. Foster system money is open-ended, meaning it's available. It's an open spigot, available forever. Cash assistance for the government is available for 1 year or 2 years or 6 months or 5 years. And you have to have all these work requirements and drug tests, and only you can have so many kids and this and that. So it's critical to understand that the foster system is one of the biggest federal government programs for low-income people and Black and brown people. And there is a reason for that, right? Because in this country, this country has never felt comfortable. This country has always been fine with giving money to its people, so long as those people were white, right? So you have to remember in the 1930s with the New Deal, with FDR, we go into the World War II and then rebuilding America after World War II, the GI Bill, we poured huge amounts of money into making a white middle class and to creating generations of people who would inherit massive amounts of wealth from their parents and their grandparents through property ownership, because the government put so much money into white home ownership, into white education, into, white employment. But when it came to doing that for Black and brown people, the government said, absolutely not, no way. And we had a massive increase in things like the foster system, like the criminal legal system. That is the only way the American government is right now willing to spend substantial amounts of money on Black and brown people. So yes, to your question, yes, we need to divest from the foster system, and we just need to put it back into communities. And, cutting checks to folks you know, the same way when I access my government loan for my student repayment, I don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. I don't have to take drug tests. They don't come in and look at the state of my kid's room. You know, that needs to be the same for everybody. And then in terms of places that are doing it well, I want to sort of switch that question around to, are our people and our communities able to take care of ourselves and our children? And I think the answer is yes. You know, we are, so one of the big things that ACS targets is drug use by parents, right? The drug war is rampant in the child welfare system. The drug war has sold this idea that if you use drugs, you're this awful person who like cannot take care of himself or their kids. We know this to absolutely not be true and a myth, but they have successfully sold that to the American public, and is, you know, very much uses evidence of drug use as a reason to take people's kids away. So do I know any, you know, child family regulation agency in the United States that does that sort of addresses parents who use drugs well? No, there are some agencies that police it less for some reasons, but no agency, you know, quote unquote, doing it well. But do I know drug user unions, you know, communities of people who use drugs who are creating childcare co-ops for each other's children, so that, you know what, if a parent wants to turn up one night and doesn't have the money for a babysitter, they can drop their kid off at the childcare co-op? Yeah, absolutely. You know, do I know mutual aid networks that just sort of popped up like wildfire all over this country to support communities? You know, everything from food assistance and housing assistance to childcare assistance. Like you're home with your kid all day and your kid's driving you crazy and you're about to throw a book at them, like, come drop your kid off at my place, you know? Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I absolutely think that there are the muscle to keep our people, our families safe. It very much exists in our communities, 100%.
I think that this is such a critically important point of, if we divest from the state in doing this kind of policing and regulation of families, the way that you both have described, in what would we invest? And so many cities across the country contract with private foster care agencies that are largely religious based to do that kind of work of vetting foster care parents, then the matching of the kids with those parents. And they are so much of the machinery of the removal of kids from their families. And it's a huge pass through of money, public tax dollars, into religious organizations to do this, who bring to bear their religious beliefs about queer people, about trans people, about queer kids, you know, and about a whole, what counts as a good family. Never mind the sort of theology of white supremacy that so many religious organizations have. And investing in community that will show up for the communities that you work for and the individuals that you work with is such a different model than investing in religious organizations as the non-state actors that will do the good work in this context. And that's a heavy lift to divest from those organizations and invest in the sorts of organizations you're talking about, Lisa, which are really empowering to hear about. I wonder if you could say a little bit, either of you, about this problem of social holds. You know, I've been working on this with some students. Most people are not aware of it. And maybe you could describe how it works and what it is.
And Ericka, please jump in.
I will. That's why my mic is open. I will.
Okay.
Oh, wait, one thing. And since my mic is open, forgive my kids if you hear them screaming, they playing the game.
Love the sounds of kids always. I just looked through the participant list, and I also see two dear friends and allies and comrades are on this call, Joyce McMillan and Hope Newton. So I just want to shout out and say hi. And also definitely, like, no pressure, but if y'all want to come off and speak, please do, because Lord knows y'all know way more than I do about this. So, so social, so there is a widespread practice in hospitals, and in particular in hospitals that are serving patients who are using Medicaid, right, public health insurance, of drug testing pregnant people, of drug testing new mothers, and of drug testing their babies, right, without their consent. So it's not like they ask you, hey, can we do a drug test? Or it's not like they talk to you and they say, hey, just want to talk to you about your drug use and see what's going on, and do you need anything? None of that. They just look at you, and if they see that you look a way that they don't like, that they don't trust, right, which usually means if you are Black or brown, or whatever, they will drug test you. They will take without asking you, they will take the contents of your body, right? They'll take your urine, or they'll take your umbilical cord, the inside of your body. They'll attach a catheter to your newborn, collect their urine, and drug test it. And if they see evidence of drug use, they don't then at that point come talk to you and say, hey, found this evidence of drug, like, do you feel like you're okay with it? Or you feel like you're in a place where you think you need some support? I know this really great harm reduction agency. They come through, they take care of your kids when you need to use. Also, they get you food, they get you whatever you need for baby. No, that's not what they do. They don't talk to you at all. Well, actually, they do talk to you to collect incriminating information, and then they call the CPS agency. And
no. In my case, they drug test my son, and then they come all nice and sweet. Well, we took a test of you, and no, we took a test of the baby, and the baby came back positive for oxycodone. And instead of saying, well, why did you take an oxycodone? Well, not oxycodone, but they knew it was a narcotic. Why did you take it? Instead of asking me that, oh, we call ACS, so they're coming tomorrow, and you cannot leave the hospital with your child. And she says it with a smile, to the point that if I didn't have a morphine drip in my arm, I probably would have punched her in the face. So because they smile at you and make it seem like this is all glorious and everything is going to be fine, but it's really not. Because then here come the ACS worker throwing daggers, like, yo, why are you using drugs? This, that, and the third. Yeah, and you've been using them your whole pregnancy. Where's the proof? And they just say it. Just because I popped positive, because when I had my baby, I didn't take this oxycodone my whole pregnancy. I had a backache and nothing was happening. I looked it up. I seen it wouldn't harm the kid, one pill. So I took it. And then, because I was scheduled for a C-section the following week, but Murphy's Law, my baby came the next day. My water broke, the baby came, so they took. So instead of asking me what was wrong, they just assume I'm some raging drug addict and all I do is drugs. Then they did something even worse. My kid, it was the summertime. My 2 kids was down south with their aunt. They made me call them back up so they could take them from me. So they wasn't even here. So I don't want to hear, no, I don't like hospitals. And it was Mount Sinai. Let me put it out there because I'm not afraid. It was Mount Sinai that did that. And then they want to act like they look at you like, but what did we do wrong? We was trying to protect your baby. No, you wasn't. Because if you'd have asked me, you'd have got an answer. And the whole time I was coming here for prenatal care, I did not pop positive one time. Now all of a sudden you find this one pill and now I'm this raging drug addict? Seriously, please. So no, hospitals, and then they tell you, oh, but you did sign a consent. It's buried real deep in, and they've been copying this paper so long, the words are fuzzy, you don't see it, but you sign in this paper because they say, and they put it under the guise of, would you want life-saving things if something happened to you or your baby? Do you want us to save your life? So you put yes, you sign yes, save my child, yes, save my life. But at the same time, on this piece of paper is, we will be drug testing. There's a possibility we will be drug testing your baby. They don't tell you that. To give me the option to cross it out and put my initial, like, that's not happening. They don't tell you that. But you know what? And I did at Mount Sinai, where, they take Medicaid, because my understanding is they drug test a lot of mothers that got Medicaid. But if I had my baby in Lenox Hill and maybe I lived on the Upper East Side, this would have never happened to me. I needed a couple more zeros in my bank account.
Though those mothers are using drugs too. It's not as if we know for a fact that drug use is pretty constant across race, income class, all the stuff.
Well, as I understand it, that this idea of a social hold, that the hospital will hold the infant and not let you leave, the birth parent leave the hospital with their new baby on the suspicion. Sometimes there's a positive drug test that may be a completely bogus charge, like in Ericka's situation, but it could also just be a suspicion of drug use, and or you've got other kids in the foster care system. So they think, oh, we're just going to hold this one because you've already shown yourself to be the kind of parent who's unfit in some way. And they make that decision on their own, the hospital does, without ACS being involved. They have no legal authority to do this. Is that right, Lisa? In terms of the law, you're the expert on the law, and I know there are a couple other people here in this meeting who know a lot about it too. So please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I just want to open it up if anyone else wants to jump in, because I've been doing a lot of talking.
I don't know if we can, if Lilia, can people unmute themselves, or do I need you or I need to do it?
Be able to.
Okay, good. So Lisa, why don't you get started, and if somebody else wants to jump in, they can raise their hand. How about we do it that way?
Yeah, so the hospital, absolutely no authority on which to hold the children. Though it is this really unsavory, and it points this really unsavory alliance between the Family Regulation Agency and ACS, where it's not like when Ericka went to Mount Sinai that there were huge placards on the wall that said, we are a hospital that provides you health care, and yes, you should trust us, and yes, we're here for your best interest, but also, like, if we don't like the way you look or whatever, we're also going to drug test without your informed consent, and we're going to hold your baby, and we're going to do this really violent thing to this new mother, which is separate you from your baby. I just can't imagine a worse thing you could do to a person. They don't say all that, and yet this really awful, unsavory alliance exists. And I see Hope's raising her hand, so I'm just going to stop there.
Hope, do you want to? Great. And
Sure.
you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Hope Newton. Hey, Lisa. Hi, class. Hey, Ericka.
Hey, Hope.
I'm an impacted parent. I go way back. I'm born and bred in Harlem, Ericka. Oh, 125 and Broadway, grand houses all the way.
St. Nick, girl, St. Nick.
Okay, so basically, I'm a parent advocate. I work with a law firm that represents parent with open ACS cases, but I also wear a lot of hats that are at the intersection of child welfare, domestic violence, education, incarceration. So the thing that happens is when they put your child on a social hold, it is so traumatic because you've gone through this particular time, and even if it's traumatic if you've never had an ACS case, it's traumatic if you have had an ACS case and your children have been returned to you, because it re-traumatizes you. It takes you back to what you experienced before. And then the other piece is when they do that social hold, it's so that they could come to have a conference in the hospital and have a discussion about what happened, to get information, but they already are going with information to criminalize you, right? And it takes a particular person, to have the appropriate supports to get through that, conference, which sometimes happens in the hospital, and sometimes it happens within 24 hours after you've given birth. And everybody's birth story is not easy, right? And then you're still very hormonal, you're very vulnerable. It's just really difficult. And I've done a lot of conferences in the hospital with parents. And it really wasn't until COVID, most of the times when I went and did a conference with a parent, their baby was coming home. I've never had a child not come home from the hospital until COVID. And that was really, really hard. right? But it's always hard, but it's like the system has dug its heels in even more so because of COVID.
Is that because you can't be there in the room, or what do you think that is?
I think it's because COVID has raised so many unknowns that they just are going with, you know, they're just being really conservative, which is horrible, you know, but they don't. And I've had cases where even if the parent has told them, or they know what the parent's history, they're still going to have that. And the parent has to repeat everything. They may have even had a conference before with ACS about what they're involved in. They're involved in prenatal, they're getting prenatal care. They may already know, or the people who's giving them the care may already know what medications they're taking and why. And they still have to go through this process, and still for ACS to make a determination whether the child can go home with their parent or not. That's
outrageous. That's outrageous. One question I will ask you all, so I hope we don't lose you before the very end of the session, but I will ask you all if there are opportunities for our students to work with you as interns. If there's anything I've been hearing from you, it's that we need more resources as advocates for the parents. And so if maybe you can send me something in the chat, or just tell everybody whether there are opportunities for students to work with you, because I know there's great interest in this issue and trying to expand resources. So thank you. I want to invite Sonia Anwar to ask a question or two. Sonia is one of the students in the class, but is an experienced litigator, a graduate student in law. We have a thing called LLMs in law school, which is for people who are already lawyers but come back for another year of training. And Sonia has done really incredible gender justice-based work before coming to Columbia. And volunteered today to be on call to engage all of you on this issue. So Sonia, what would you like to ask of Ericka and Lisa?
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your expertise. And my question, I have many, but the one that I want to start with is from Ms. Brewington, and thank you for your insight. When you were speaking, Ms. Brewington, you talked about the notion of parents folding under the pressure and the intimidation that comes from this process, and then you talked about how sometimes they hear certain things that give them pause, that makes them know that the parents on the other end, they know their rights. And I'm curious to hear from your point of view, what is that language that when you, in your work, that you tell parents to use that identifies them as people with knowledge of their own rights when they're involved in this process?
Well, the first thing is when they knock on your door and they want to take your kids, get a warrant. That's the first thing that should be out your mouth. Get a warrant. Even if they come back with the cops, get a warrant. Because number one, they have no proof. They have somebody call. For example, Lisa might have called and made an allegation towards me. It could be Lisa could be mad at me, so she could be being vindictive. You know, get a warrant. No judge in his right mind is going to sign that warrant because you don't have no proof. Do you have proof these children are being neglected? No, you don't. So the judge is not going to sign the warrant. So once you say get a warrant, then they're going to be like, they back off. Or if you go to that meeting or they claim you're going to give a meeting, tell them you want representation. You want a lawyer. You want an advocate there. Somebody, especially if you don't know much, somebody there that knows terminology to say to them or knows the law, knows your rights. Or start looking into Google it. Google your rights yourself. And once you tell them things like, listen, this is wrong. You can't come in my house without a warrant. Who called you? It was anonymous. So tell anonymous to prove to you, give you the proof that I'm neglecting my child. That's all it is. You have to have proof. Like as a cop, I can't come and kick your door in because somebody called me and said you're selling drugs. Don't I need the proof? A judge is not going to sign a warrant for me to search your apartment. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with ACS because you're coming in and you're doing a search. You're searching to see if I got food. You're searching my kids. You're searching to see how my house, how my apartment look. You're searching to see how we live. It's a search. So you need a warrant. Because when, this is my, quote unquote, my private property. You can't just come on in my and then look around, not unless I invite you in. So you don't invite them in. That should be first and foremost for any parent. Don't invite them in. They knock on your door, get a warrant. Keep them at the door. Get a warrant. Because you can say that to the cops, but you can't say that to an ACS worker. That doesn't make sense. Tell them, get a warrant. So that's some of the language you hear. Or, where did these allegations come from? Where's your proof? Show me your proof. Show me the proof you have of these allegations against me. And then they start backpedaling. Like, okay, now it's getting sticky for them because now this parent is standing up. Show me. Or if you don't know, maybe you know somebody in your neighborhood. Maybe there's a girl or a family that been through this. You can go run and, call them real quick. Yo, they at my door. What should I do? I would tell a parent real quick, this is what you should do. First thing is get a warrant. Now show me your proof. And if they take you to that meeting, don't bring your kids because that's how they snatch your kids from that family team conference they call. Oh, we're not, the first thing they tell you, oh, we're not going to take your kids. That's a lie. That's why they want you to that's why they insist on you bringing your kids to this meeting. Because they want the kids there so they can snatch them because they snatch them out. No. And number one, you don't even have to show up to that meeting. I understand you don't have to show up to that meeting. If you don't go, they can't do nothing because you're not there to defend yourself. Because it's supposed to be a family team conference. I'm the family. How are you having a conference without me? No, I'm not showing up until I have representation. Until somebody I know of my choosing is there to represent my interests. And you can tell them that. That's when they say, they'll tell you, you don't need a lawyer. You don't need this. Yes, I do. The more you insist I don't need a lawyer, the more I know I do. So that's how you should go about it. Because that's the beginning. Everything happens in the beginning.
I just want to add that there are awesome advocates in New York City, activists. The Parent Legislative Action Network is pushing for Miranda rights in child welfare. So, it's just really, it feels a little bit shocking that we're in 2021 pushing for this when this has been established. When was Miranda established in criminal legal system? 1960s, right? Is that when Miranda v. Arizona? So here we are 70 years later, establishing this in the child welfare system in New York City, which is that, you have a right to be informed of the allegations against you. That you should be told that you don't actually have to let the caseworker in, so on and so forth. And so I believe the bill has been introduced in the New York State legislature. And again, the Parent Legislative Action Network is pushing for it. And I'm going to put a link to the campaign in the chat. Also, we're working with Ericka and with a bunch of different people and organizations, JMAC for Families, Drug Policy Alliance, others, to really legislate that hospitals got to ask you. They have to ask you before they drug test you, and you have a right to say, no, you actually can't drug test me, and you also can't drug test my baby, and then you can't refuse us medical care for saying no. So, getting to your question, Sanya, that there are definitely efforts afoot to really try to decrease the number of people that are being pushed into the system, right? To slowly close that pipeline, because it's just so expensive right now. Right now in the United States, over 50% of Black children have had their parents investigated for child abuse and neglect. Over 50%. In a place like Massachusetts, it's over 70%. And an investigation is not an innocuous thing. It is a frightening fucking thing. It is a scary, scary thing that no parent should have to go through. And if anyone's on from Parent Legislative Action Network or anyone working on the Miranda bill, please feel free to speak up. Or anyone who wants to speak up about anything, really.
And I just wanted to say what an investigation looked like. They go and talk to everybody, your neighbors, your landlord, your property manager, the guy in the corner store, anybody you have contact with, they go and talk. So these people, if they didn't know nothing, and you might live in some neighborhood, you got a neighbor that don't like you. So here they are, they're looking at you. Oh, she has an ACS case. They're going to take her kids. Now, not only do you have these people breathing down your neck, now you got your so-called neighbors talking about you behind your back, make you feel even more pressure. You know what I mean? So it's even worse. And then they say, they come up with some of the craziest things, and you wouldn't believe what they said about me. Not even about me, about my, I was in a hospital when they came, and the worker, she could have caused an all-out war. She told my sister that I was allowing my boyfriend, which is my kid's father, to molest my daughter. She actually said this to my sister, to the point where my sister was livid, came flying back into the hospital room ready to fight me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And ready to send my nephews and everybody to fight my kid's father. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I really, like, they say something. And I'm like, what? Why would you tell my sister that? You know, they say some things. They even told his mother that, you know, they have suspicion that he's molesting my daughter. So these are some of the lies they come up with. And then they had the nerve to say, my oldest son is 15 years older than my daughter, and 13 years older than my son, and 20 years older than my baby. They actually said, well, we don't know if you should leave your kids, the little kids with the oldest one. Well, how we know he's not touching them? What kind of kids you freaking think I raised? I'm not that parent. You know what I'm saying? How you gonna go around saying this stuff and you have no proof? You have no proof. I mean, it was to the point where my daughter's pediatrician was upset that she got involved, and she was like, in the school, they was like, no, listen, that's going a little too far. You know, she don't come off as a child that's being abused. Why are y'all saying stuff? Like, when they came to the school and it was brought up, my daughter's pediatrician lost her mind. She was like, yo, what happened? What's going on? What did you say? I didn't say anything. She was like, well, why are they saying that he's doing? I said, I don't know. This is what they came up with. So, you know, thank God for the school and the pediatrician, because I don't know what would have happened. You know what I mean? And that's why I think, one of the first things that should happen, it shouldn't just be ACS call. If you want for a thing of neglect, there should be 3 entities that weigh in on this. 3. I think it should be ACS, the teachers, and the kid's doctor, the pediatrician. All 3 have to agree that this child or these children are being neglected. If 2 out of the 3 don't agree, then ACS needs to get the fuck away from my door, and excuse my language. That's how I feel. That's how I really feel about it. They come from all 3. You know what I'm saying? That's the true story. And that should be like the top law. You know how you got the Constitution, the First Amendment? That's the First Amendment. You have to have 3 entities to get ACS to come knocking on your door. I don't care if Lisa called and made an allegation. But if we don't have backup, we're not knocking on this woman's door. That's how it should be. Okay, now I've said enough.
No, thank you. And I think for me, in the process of learning more about ACS, the most difficult thing to comprehend was the lack of safeguards and procedural safeguards, especially in light of what is at stake and in light of how intimidating and terrifying this process is. There's another question that I wanted to ask all of you, and that it's a political question, and that has to do with the last 4 years. I know you mentioned how COVID has changed the outcomes in the last few months, and I'm curious how the last 4 years of the political administration that we had, how that had impacted ACS's role, because in one way I imagine, since it's ostensibly a public welfare organization, was it given less funding or less importance, or because of its police powers, was it somehow, what has changed, if anything, the last 4 years? and if going forward with the new administration and some of the new policies that are coming down, if you're hopeful, and what are you hoping to see in the next 4 years?
Just want to open in case Hope, or again, no pressure, Hope and Joyce at all, but just want to definitely make space if you do want to get on.
Hey, Lisa.
Hey.
I wasn't going to do it because Miss Frank had asked me if I wanted to speak, and I said no. I felt like my colleagues had it here, but I just want to talk about how unjust this system is and how they wield their power to maintain their position. How families operate working with the system without having knowledge of what their rights are, and ACS feels or claims to feel that it would be a threat to children remaining safe if families knew their rights, which is absolutely bonkers. I want to tell a personal experience that just happened to me. So I began putting up flyers, and I don't know if you guys have seen them. I put them up throughout the 4 boroughs. Myself, Ericka assisted other parents who have been impacted. It was only parents. We put up these posters, size 24 by 36, out throughout the 4 boroughs. And they had 5 different messages on them. But the messages were very clear, and kind of one of them was from a parent perspective because we used some profanity in that one, and it was FACS. And so ACS was boiling over about it, and they contacted my place of employment and advised my job that if they didn't terminate me immediately, that they would lose their contract with them. And this is one of the reasons why it's important to divest in systems and invest directly with the community, because when a system holds the purse strings, then they hold the power, and then they co-opt places that should be working independently in advocacy roles to create change. And they're unable to do that because they become beholden to the contract that they have. So in my case, my boss pushed back, but I was suspended for 3 weeks. He suspended me for 3 weeks with pay, and decided that when ACS would not change their position, that he could not continue to keep me on suspension with pay. And he terminated me on Friday at about 4:30. I was rehired today, Lisa, at what time? Maybe 10 o'clock this morning. But everyone is not Joyce McMillan. And so while ACS has power, it's clear to me now that my being on the 2019 New York Most Powerful or Most Influential list was not a mistake, because I couldn't wrap my head around it. But the power is not the power that I have. The power is the power that I have to organize people and to understand the message of change and what's needed to actually accomplish that. So in being in this position, the coalition that I've put together, that Lisa spoke about earlier, PLAN, the members of PLAN and other people who I've interacted with, some even in the capacity of employment at Columbia, working independent of Columbia, pushed back on ACS this weekend. And by this morning, they had retracted their requests for my termination and chalked it off to be all a great misunderstanding. And so it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was only a misstatement in thinking that they could get away with that with me, as I'm sure they have with so many in the past. Whole entire organizations are co-opted through this same process. And we have to understand that they are a rogue agency that is not to be trusted, not with families, not with children, not with communities, not with mandated reporters, not with anyone that they interact with. They are toxic and poisonous. And they poison the people around them by holding dollars to have them perform in the fashion that they would like to see them perform. And so I just ask everyone to maintain your integrity. You'll feel a lot better in the morning. You'll sleep a lot better at night. And work with organizations like Movement for Family Power, JMAC for Families, PLAN, and there's a host of others that I'm not going to take up a lot of time to go through. But I want to thank Lisa and Aaron at Movement for Family Power first and foremost, because they jumped in the lead in helping everyone to organize around reversing what had happened with me. So publicly, Lisa, I'd like to say thank you. And thank everyone for taking a moment to listen to me.
Thank you, Hope.
Yeah, I was on a Zoom with these guys just now.
I figured that. Oh,
Joyce, you got to mute yourself.
Thanks, Joyce. Danielle, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask about mandated reporting in the case where I'm actually an advocate at Bellevue for domestic violence and sexual assault. And so occasionally there are children, you know, I haven't had to yet, but I guess my question would be, in the case that there is a child who witnesses that violence, you know, I certainly don't want to necessarily report, but you know, I guess in any of your expertise, what is a good step for that? If anyone knows.
You want me to take it, Lisa?
I can.
I feel really, Ericka, I'm just going to answer really quickly and then turn it over to you.
Okay.
As a kid who grew up in a household with a lot of domestic violence, and my parents, CPS was called on my parents, and it was pretty much hell afterwards. Let me tell you, do not report. Do not report, because, I mean, you know, you're putting like this idea that we are putting families on a trajectory that's going to be better than when they are is not borne out by the evidence. Like it's not borne out by most people's experiences, and it's certainly not borne out by quote unquote the evidence, you know. And this is particularly problematic in the intimate partner violence context, because when particular mothers go to seek help with intimate partner violence and then have their kids taken away for that, guess what then happens? Mothers no longer to go seek help. And we know that that is happening. We now have like all these national studies. I mean, we know this from personal experience, right? Like, it doesn't take a genius to figure that out, right? If as a mom, you go to seek help for being in a problematic relationship, and then as a result of seeking help, your kids get taken away from you. Like, we know just from common sense that you're not going to go seek that help. And we also have all these national studies that really back that up. And, you know, white feminism has done like an enormously shitty job of putting women of color, mothers in color, of color in this awful situation where experiences with intimate partner violence are completely flattened, right, into some paradigm of all we have to do is call the cops and CPS and they'll make it all better. And that is just not at all the case.
No, absolutely. I will say, when you start, you actually warn them immediately that what mandated reporting is, and that, you know, that you do not want to report. And so just be careful what information you give. Like, that's the sort of actual like first things you tell the survivor who comes in. But agreed. I mean, the system is in place, and I guess sometimes, I mean, do you get extra resources if CPS gets involved? And honestly, it seems like there is very little benefit. But sorry, please go ahead.
I just wanted to, Ericka, if you don't mind, I'd like to just jump in on this. There's some advocacy being done around mandated reporters, because part of, for people to do your work that you do, you have to, and to get your license as a social worker or in whatever field that you work, that you have to go through this mandated reporting training. And you're told that this is something that you have to do. Like, it is your responsibility. And there are people in there's advocacy around, you know, reaching out to schools of social work, reaching out to different places, reaching out to deans, to having people, you know, kind of come in and talk to classes or look at the curriculums. There's all sorts of advocacy to reach to do that, because what happens is people call because the mindset or the framing is you're calling because you're helping. And what happens is you don't realize that when you call, you are adding an additional lifelong lasting trauma to the family in terms of what they're already dealing with. And I was personally introduced to the family regulation system because I am a domestic violence survivor. And my husband used power and control to call ACS, the ambulance and police on me. And I had already been involved in court for custody and, back and forth. So it was just another tool that he used against me. So the fact that I had gone through that experience in and out of family, housing, criminal, Supreme Court for revolving door for close to a decade is what that landed me with him. Okay, so I have survived it just like Ericka has survived it. And I guess everybody should thank him and his family for making me the advocate that I am today. Because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here doing this work. I'd be doing something else. But that's why I'm very passionate about it. But there's lots of advocacy going on around how to address that mandated reporter piece, because you have to do it because that's part of your job. But we're looking at you starting to reassess how you're doing it and what does that look like and how are you really helping families. But it still sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I didn't quite see an easy answer, and thank you for sharing all of that. Can I actually, sorry, I just wanted to ask, do you know if there's any, in New York, if there's like any associated with specific hospitals, advocate groups that are working sort of immediately there, or is it, because you mentioned going to schools of social work and deans and things like that.
So I, as a parent advocate, that works with a law firm that represents parents with open ACS cases, and also as a DV survivor who is on a board of an organization called Voices of Women. I have spoken to social work graduate students at Columbia as well as Hunter. So I have spoken as part of a child welfare panel, and been involved in having those conversations. But I know that within the organization that I work for, there is some talk around social workers who are looking to kind of have some sort of guided way in how they're looking at mandated reporters, especially with social workers, and how they get into those fields. So I know that there's something going on. I'll put my email in the chat, so that I could, if you want to give me your information or share information, I can get more information from you, who to connect with. So I will give you my personal email address.
Thank you, Hope.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Brewington, do you have anything you want to add to this part of the discussion?
I just, for me, mandating reporting, you need to use your judgment. And before you report, sit down and talk to the child. If you feel like the child is, sit down and talk to the child, especially if the child is old enough to understand, or talk, not only talk, listen. Because there's a difference between hearing and listening. Listen. And sometimes you gotta read between the lines because she might still be scared and don't know who to trust. You know what I mean? So she might say some things, but you got to listen and look at her body language, look her in her eye, look at the child. They will all give you clues on how you should proceed. And just be cautious. Like, not everybody you should mandate a report, especially if she came to call for help. Because if you report and her kids get taken, like Lisa said, the next time, let's say there is a next time, she's not going to call and reach out for help, and it could be disastrous. You know what I mean? So you have to use your better judgment, but really listen. Don't just hear them, listen. Listen, open not only your mind, open your heart and listen to what they're saying.
Can I not take over, but say one more thing, please, before we wrap up?
Sure.
About the mandated reporters. It's really important to me. I've been pushing for mandated supporters, and that means that instead of reporting, we would support. And when we look at 8,000 children being in the care of the Administration of Children's Services right now, with only 14% of them being in the system for reasons related to abuse, and that's mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse combined. 14% of the 8,000 is there for that reason. So when we think about that, it makes more sense that if a kid comes to school hungry, that we would refer the family to a pantry, which is supporting the family, mandating that teachers take active roles in supporting, fulfilling the needs of a family in a reasonable fashion versus supporting. And so for all you mandated reporters who are in this audience who are confused about your responsibility is to report if you feel the child is in danger. And just like it's at everyone's discretion when they just happen to always feel like the child is in danger, you also have the liberty to say, this is not a situation that puts a child in danger, and it's not something I feel like I need to report on. And so that does not put your license at risk, because you have to reasonably believe that that child is in danger for you to be mandated to make that call. And if you're supplying or helping the family to supply what they're lacking, lack is not danger. And so we have to begin to think about the wording and how they utilize the words against us, but being as savvy as them to support our position of overutilizing this system that is harming children, families, and communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. McMillan. I do again want to invite anybody to raise their hand who has a question. And while you're formulating your question, I would just ask, we've heard about some important legislative changes, we're sort of Mirandizing this whole process, perhaps changing the mandatory reporting rules. I'm wondering if any of you, maybe Lisa, but others would have thoughts on effective litigation that's going on right now to challenge some of the most egregious practices by ACS. I know the New York City Commission on Human Rights has an open investigation of some of these issues and the ways in which hospitals are structurally discriminating against certain patients. But is there other litigation we should know about that is promises to lighten some of the pressure on families that we've been talking about?
So yes, 100%. I do want to just take this moment to impress upon, especially law students here, that, if you are committed to doing movement work, I think letting go of the idea of centrality of litigation and sort of doubling down on your commitment to doing what the movement needs you to do in that moment, whether it is do an Excel sheet, write policy, legal research, or litigation, really, that should be more your moral compass. I think we go through law school, at least I very much was taught that social change happens through litigation, and it's just totally not at all the case. So with that being said, litigation nonetheless is absolutely important, right? That's how we establish laws in our country that affect everybody. And there have, I want to just sort of talk a little bit about the Indian Child Welfare Act. So by the 1970s, over 2/3 of Indigenous kids no longer lived in their homes. They had been removed by the family regulation system. This is very much part and parcel of this country's sort of history of genocide of Indigenous folks, cultural genocide. And so, in the aftermath of of this coming to light to more mainstream society, this law developed called the Indian Child Welfare Act, which actually does contain a lot of the procedural safeguards that folks like Hope and Joyce and Ericka are fighting for. The idea that you just can't take kids without a warrant, and you have a right to not talk, and you have a right to a jury trial, and all these things. And there are constant efforts to, it's a federal law, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and there are constant efforts at by very conservative legal groups, I think what's called the Blackwater Institute or something spooky like that, to push back, roll back against ICWA, and those efforts have failed, but they are They are ongoing, but failed thus far. You know, in the drug use context, I used to work at an organization that has done amazing litigation to challenge this idea that drug use during pregnancy is per se child abuse. And so they have been able to use appellate litigation and really science, which really shows that in utero exposure we don't actually know that it damages children in any way. They've been able to use that to get some good results in some places. But I just want to spend a little bit of time on this because, so in New Jersey, I worked on a series of cases where you know, in New Jersey, the CPS agency used to take a parent's participation in methadone treatment, which is the gold standard of care for opiate use. Used to take participation in methadone treatment as evidence of child abuse. And so if the baby tested positive for methadone when the baby was born. And so this organization, National Advocates for Pregnant Women, litigated it up through the New Jersey Supreme Court and got an awesome decision that proof of methadone use is not child abuse. It actually like means you're like getting the health care that the World Health Organization and SAMHSA and all these really reputable health agencies recommend you get. Then the next case that we worked on after that was the Child Welfare Agency saying, oh, you started methadone too late in your pregnancy. So like last year we said using methadone was evidence of child abuse. Now we're going to take your enrollment in a methadone program during your third trimester versus your first trimester as evidence that you are a neglectful parent. And then they fought that case. And the next case after that was, oh, well, you're using Suboxone, which it's sort of similar to methadone in terms of treating opioid use disorder. You're using Suboxone and you're actually not getting Suboxone prescribed. You're getting it from the street because you don't have regular access to health insurance. That's evidence of child abuse. So it began to feel like a little bit like a game of whack-a-mole, you know? And I think it very much speaks to the lawlessness of child welfare agencies and also speaks to the need for litigation that also is accompanied by people power. So it's not enough to have these cases in court. You need a movement of people like Joyce is building, like Hope is building, like Ericka is building to really make these agencies scared to keep pushing the way that they do.
Exactly. I thank you for raising the name of the National Advocates for Pregnant Women. They do a lot of this impact litigation and they're very good. There are other groups as well. I would just ask any of you, are there opportunities for students to work with you as interns who can help out with the, as Lisa said, from doing spreadsheets to legal research and everything in between? Do you take interns?
I work with the Center for Family Representation, and I know that we have had interns from at particular times. We have a CFR policy group that I'm on that CFR policy team that is also connected and aligned with the work that Joyce does with Plan and all the parents who are involved in that. And the person, I could give you the information for the person who heads that team and see. There are usually, we've had interns before, so there are opportunities to do that. So I can send, you have my email address, I could send you that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so anybody you can reach out to me. You have my email on here, and then I'll just gather the names and forward them to the person. Tara Coles is the litigation supervisor for that.
I would add that Bronx Defenders is also doing very good work on this issue. And I know that you all work with them. And
okay, good.
Lisa, are you in a Movement for Family Power? Are you in a position to have help from students?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so in terms of interns that are not connected with a clinic, we pay, and we have filled our paid positions for this fall, for the spring and the summer. The fall is still open, so definitely reach out to us. If you are wanting to work with us through like, you know, your position within the school and like getting credit or whatever, then we have, since we're not paying them, we have more room to work with people. And so I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and folks should definitely reach out to us. We, you know, we're an organization of 2 people. We rely so heavily on interns and volunteers, which means you actually get exposure to some really cool, substantial work. Not necessarily legal work, so just know that, but you do get really substantial exposure.
That's great. Thank you. Last thing I'll ask you is, we're in the beginning of a mayoral campaign, mayoral election in New York City. Not everything, but some of the things that you have talked about could be changed by a mayor. Not asking you to endorse anybody. I'm wondering if you have a sense that the kinds of reforms that you've been talking about and the forms of human harm that you've been talking about are being taken up in anybody's campaign, and whether there's good organizing to move these issues into the critical issues that are being talked about by folks that are running, campaigning for mayor, because there are a couple of pretty progressive people who are throwing their hat in.
I haven't heard anybody's platform yet, so I don't. I'm looking forward to reading what they're all about, and maybe seeing if, you know, I can have a voice in helping whoever I feel is worthy get elected. But I don't even know who's in yet. I haven't heard. I think because I'm over the political stuff because of Donald Trump. I think I need a break. So I haven't really been looking forward to anything political right now. I need a breather. Maybe ask me this question again in April and I have a better answer. But right now I'm just, I'm over political. Anything political, I'm over it.
Yeah.
I need it was too much. It was too much.
We all need a break. But these folks are moving fast and raising money, a lot of money in some cases. And most of them have a platform around police reforms. Some of them might go up to or close to abolish the police, or at least defund significantly. And I just hear the echo of the same kinds of concerns in the family regulation context of we need to defund these institutions and then invest in our communities. And it's a civil form of policing that we experience, or that you've experienced through the child welfare process, the ACS monitoring process. So whatever help we can bring to getting these sorts of reforms on the radar of the folks that are running for mayor, I think would be great.
What we really need is go back to a village raising a child. Remember your grandmother used to tell you it takes a village to raise a child? That's what we need. When the whole block took care of all the kids, like there was this one mother that stayed home and she watched, if we were outside playing, she watched all of us. She disciplined all of us. And your mother didn't say nothing if Miss Sally had to pop you because you was acting up. That's what we need to go back to. And that's the problem. It's too many people, don't touch my child, or my child is an angel. No. No kid is an angel, especially one of mine. I know for a fact, because I know how I was as a kid. So I don't put nothing past my kids. You know what I mean? So, but we need to go back to the whole village raising. And then, in my opinion, there's no grandmothers in my community. Like grandma and mom is hanging out in the club together, and you got the 15-year-old sister watching the kids, but she's really hanging out with her friends. So your kids are watching what their aunt is doing, so they think it's cool, and then you're raising your child as your friend instead of your child. And like Lisa said, we do need a community. And what should happen, where they should take the money from ACS and do, is 24-hour daycare. Seriously, 24-hour daycare. And I mean, like, and it's open. Like, if you can pay what you can. Like, oh, you know what, Ericka, I got $5. All right, I'm gonna take that $5 because guess what? I'm funded by the city, so I'm gonna get this money. But I'm gonna take your child if you need to run, or if you feel like you need a break, or if you're working a 24-hour shift and your babysitter called out. there's no need to be on a waiting list. It should be funded it should be open 24 hours a day, fully staffed with people that's been trained, you know, just in case you are that nurse's aide that worked the late shift and your babysitter happened not to show up. But you can't call out because you know, if you call out, you don't get paid for that day. I'm gonna go to my little 24-hour daycare and let them know they're gonna take my child. They're gonna wait. They're gonna take this $20 I have, or this $5, whatever I donate, and we're gonna feed. And even if you are that parent that you're going through something, you bring your child, and we're gonna feed your child. You know what I'm saying? If it's no hot water in your house, you could bring your son or your daughter, because we have male and female staff. The males to do the little boys, the females to do the little girls, full service. Like, we're gonna be that community to help you raise your child, and everything should be okay. That's where they need to put this money at. 24, and it needs to be not just one in Harlem and one in Brooklyn and one in, it should be dotted all over, but, you know, centralized in a certain neighborhood. So it could be for a 10-block radius or a 20-block radius. And everybody know, let's go, and we can name it anything for lack of better, you know. I'm gonna pick Ericka's house. We're gonna drop the babies over at Ericka's house, because we know, I want to go out and get high. They're gonna watch my baby, so I won't get a child neglect case. Or I gotta work and I have nobody to watch my child tonight. I could go take my child to Ericka's house because somebody's there. Or, oh my God, my check I couldn't make it this week, and I don't have nothing to feed my child. But guess what? If I go to Ericka's house, my child is going to get that hot meal that they need. That's what they should take the money from ACS and do. In a perfect world, that's what would happen. But that's my vision of a perfect world, of perfect, you know, the community helping. Is this 20, and we don't even have to call it 24-hour case. It's full service. Everything happens. We give you referrals for school, referrals for jobs, help you fill out applications, help you get your GED. I mean, full service for the community. Take care of our community like they used to do. That's where we need to go. We need to go back to our roots, where we used to take care of our community. You know what I mean? Because everybody had that one grandmother in their neighborhood that fed the whole block. You know what I mean? I had that great grandmother. She fed everybody. She took in everybody. If you didn't have no money, she didn't care, because your baby was not going to be in that house by themselves while you running around acting stupid or going to work. That's how she felt. She'd rather have your baby safe and not take no money than have your baby in the house and the baby let something on fire and that baby get hurt. That's how I look. That's how I'm looking at it. You know, and that prevents a neglect case. You know, because you can honestly say, no, I was not using drugs around my child. They was at Ericka's house. You know what I'm saying? I have a babysitter. And you come, yes, this child was here. And if it needs to stay here until the mother comes down, the baby can stay here until the mother or father or both come down. That's how I feel about it.
Well, you will let us know when you've taken your break from the political system, and then you will run for mayor.
I need a deputy mayor. Who's volunteering?
Well, you've got some good people in your crew. I want to thank Lisa and Ericka and Joyce and Hope and the others who joined us today to talk about the work that they're doing, how incredibly pressing it is, and really for giving us your time. Thank you so much. And I do hope that we can pay it back, perhaps with some interns that we can send your way to help out with the work. And, you know, don't hesitate to call me or let me know if there's some other way that I can be supportive. So thank you so very much for the work.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for having me.
You bet. You bet. So everyone be well, stay safe, and thanks again. Have a good evening.